Hello, Mika, and welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at John chapter 4, verses 25 and 26. But first, last time in John chapter 4. And there we have it. Let's go ahead and take a look at what rubric, everything we look for as we go through the text, and start. Dicit ei mulier scio quia Messias venet, qui dicitur Christus, cum ergo veneret ille nobis ad nuntiabit omnia. Dicit ei Jesus, ego sum, qui loquor tecum. And there we have it. Dicit we've seen many times before. We know that this is the present form, but otherwise we don't need to parse it. A, likewise, is seen before it comes from is, id. We know that this one is going to be masculine in reference to Jesus, though really in this case, in this form, we might properly call it common. Mulier here, I think we've also seen her refer to that before, and that's going to be nominative, singular, and masculine are subject to go with dicit, and then scio as a first person singular with that O, present tense, active, and indicative, introduces our direct statement. So, comma, quote marks. Oops. Keep forgetting no articles in Latin. Woman says in the present tense to him, scio, I know. And then I have quia, which is often used and has often been used in what we've read so far to introduce a direct statement. So as we take a look ahead of it, we have Messias and venet, that it right there as the ending. Then we know that this is going to be a direct statement, as usual. So I know that, rather than translating this as a because and explanation. Messias, venet, we have our it, so that's going to be a third person singular. It is either present tense, as it always is, or perfect tense, and it is active, and it is indicative. So I know from looking at the Greek that when it should be present tense because it stands in the place of erketai, which itself is present. All right, then Messias, here we have our as ending, but this is a word that does not naturally appear in Latin. Instead, this is a borrowed word from Greek, which in turn got it from Hebrew. And the Hebrew is mu with a comets, sheen with a heric yod, then hey with a patah accent. That's Mashiach. So, since it's borrowed from other languages, this one, as far as I'm aware, it doesn't decline. I don't remember if we found it when we were in John chapter 1, which I think is the first place we see it. If we found whether or not it declines. I don't think it does. I couldn't find it in Short. I couldn't find it in Cassell's. So I'm just going to assume that this is a probable indeclinable. So indec, but here it's functioning as the subject of venet. So probably should have written that somewhere else. So subject, that Messiah comes, present tense most likely. Qui, seen that before, this one's going to be nominative, singular, and masculine with Messias as its referent. Dicitur, T-U-R, is going to be our third person, singular, and with U-R we know that this is and also off of dic, a present, rubrics in the way, passive in form and indicative. Who is said, or what is more likely, who is called. And then we see with Christus, US right there for nominative, singular, masculine. So it's who is called Christus, and cum as either a adverb, or is it an adverb? Now I don't remember. But as a preposition or whatever the other form of cum is, this tells us that this clause, the relative clause with qui, has to end. So comma there, who is called Christ, just to explain what the meaning of the Greek borrowed, Hebrew borrowed word it means. So cum, this one could be a preposition, but since we have ergo immediately following it, followed by another verb, preposition doesn't make any sense. So in this case, it must be a cum clause, in which case we should expect a subjunctive verb, depending on what type of cum clause it is. So we can't translate that until we know more. Ergo, of course, means therefore. When at it, we have erit, which is either a future perfect third person singular ending, or it is a perfect subjunctive third person singular ending. With cum, the perfect subjunctive makes more sense because cum doesn't normally take a future indicative. It can take present indicative or normal future indicative, I think, when it's a... So there are the different types of clauses. There is the circumstantial clause, and that one might be the one with when it takes an indicative verb. Then there's the temporal clause, the adversative clause, and the when, since, although, because. Explanatory, I guess what is, or causative. Maybe that's the fourth one. Fourth one is pretty uncommon in the things that I've read. So future perfect doesn't make sense, so we've got a temporal, an adversative, or a causative with this. So third person, singular, perfect, active, and subjunctive. When, ile, nominative, singular, masculine from ile, ila, and ilud. When that one comes, although that one comes, since that one comes. So I don't think causative makes much sense, because what is it causing? Him coming will cause him coming? No. Is it not a good thing, then although a adversative that he comes? No. I think it's temporal is the one that makes the most sense. When for that further one away, rather than hikakak, which would be the nearer one, this. Nobis, here we have from nos, noster, nobis, nos, nobis. This is either going to be a dative or a ablative, plural, and common, really, depending on how it's functioning in the sentence. So it could be coming to us, but we would, I think, expect an ad nos, which we don't have, so it's probably not with venerit. Instead, ad nuntiabit is the more likely verb to be taking nobis, because nuntio does take an indirect object. So note that we've got the prefix on there, which slightly changes nuntia from a noun to something else. So bit is a third singular future active indicative. And then omnia, with that ia, is going to be either a nominative or an accusative plural neuter. Neuter wouldn't be the subject of a nuntiabit, instead it would be the object of a nuntiabit. So nominative doesn't make sense, but accusative does make sense. And then dative with a nuntiabit makes a lot more sense than ablative with, what? Nothing. So, therefore, when that one comes, and I'll explain the present in a moment, he will, this would mean teach, or it could mean preach. So those, there are a couple other options, but I'm going to only write down those two. And then nobis would appear after that in the English. Us, omnia, all plural things. So before we get on to 26, quick explanation of why present tense. So since we've got a temporal clause here. It's telling us a time. Cum is giving us the time. Specifically, it's giving us the time from the context of the previous verses, which we have present tense, and present tense. So this is all happening either at the present or in the future. Really, the future makes a lot more sense. So then why perfect tense subjunctive? Why not a present subjunctive? Well, if we had a present subjunctive, then there are two things that could be implied. It could be implied that this is an ongoing action rather than a completed action. And it could also be implied that it is contemporaneous with I knowing. But that doesn't make much sense. I know that Messiah comes who is called Christ. When he comes right now, that doesn't make much sense. Instead, with the perfect, we have a not the same time as our main clause with skeel. Instead, we have a completed action, but not in the past. Because we are in the subjunctive, in a cum clause specifically, the subjunctive does not fulfill, the perfect does not fulfill its normal temporal function of telling us time. It's just purely aspect here. So when that one comes, but only once, it's not like he comes and he continues to come, which doesn't make any sense anyway. Instead, he comes and he is now here, or he will be here. So that is why I have translated it as present rather than when, therefore, that one has come. Which I suppose is another option, is a perfect present. But anyway, moving on to 26, dicit, we have clear close of her statement. We don't need to parse or parse again. Ego tells us that he starts speaking here. So then we've got Jesus says, with an S, don't forget it this time, to her, ego sum. This is something that we've seen beforehand, and if you recall how the religion of the Jews at the time worked, to say something like this, just ego sum, is, they would consider it blasphemy. That's why we see the Pharisees and the scribes and the lawyers getting really hot, as it were, whenever they speak to Jesus, and he says this. It's because this is a statement which means I am God, and that's not a good thing to say unless you are God. So, first person singular present, it's active and it is indicative. Nominative singular, I am. Qui, of course, is going to be nominative, singular, and masculine to refer back to ego. Loquor, or right there, is going to be our first singular present tense, and it is active, and it is indicative. And then te cum, we've got cum with te. Whenever you have a personal pronoun, cum will always come after it, tacked onto the back. It's reasons, really. So this is going to be ablative, singular. There we go. I am who am speaking with you. And I don't know if he stops speaking right there and it goes on to more explanation, or he continues to speak, so we're not going to put in quote marks until next time. So there we have that. Let's take a look at it in its own context. Woman says to him, I know that Messiah comes, who is called Christ. When, therefore, that one comes, he will teach or preach to us all things. Jesus says to her, I am who am speaking with you. And there we have it. So what we've got going on clearly here is that Jesus is not only answering her unasked question, he's telling her more than she asked. So what she's really asking is, are you Messiah? And Jesus says, you bet I am. But not only that, Messiah is God, and therefore I am God. There we have it. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope taking a look at this has been helpful for you, and I hope that you have a very good day. Wale.